actually on a 2-year secondment. I'm normally a senior lecturer in entrepreneurship, but back in the day, I was actually involved in dot-coms and a global operations director, so it's really nice to be sort of bringing those two worlds together and working with technology again. So I'm going to talk to you today about the iPilot, which is a project we've had running for about 2 years. Give you an overview of what we've done, talk about the role of student engagement in that project, and then the 3 key areas that we wanted to look at in terms of impact, which were collaboration, digital literacies, and creativity, and also look at the role that Canvas plays within that, and then look at some of our early findings. Canvas and the iPilot have been 2 massive projects for us, so I do have quite a lot of content, so I apologise if I skip past some bits rather quickly, but of course very happy to talk about it after the session if you want more information. So the University of Winchester, it's a relatively small university. We've got about 7,500 students and about 650 academic staff. And that's where it is, right down in the south of England. And it's a fantastic city. It's the ancient capital of England and recently voted as the best place to live in the UK. So I thought I'd better start by going through a little bit of UK lingo, because I might use some terminology that might not be familiar to you, so I thought I'd quickly whiz through it at the beginning. So we have 4 faculties, which are then structured into academic departments. We have 2 12-week semesters per year, and we have programs, which is the name of the degree that a student will be studying. And those programs are in turn broken down into modules. So modules for us and many other UK universities doesn't mean the same as modules in Canvas, which, as you can imagine, causes quite a lot of confusion when you're first introducing people to Canvas. TEL is quite a common term in the UK for technology enhanced learning. LTD is learning and teaching development. And one I thought of today I should have put on there was VLE, which is virtual learning environment, which is what we call an LMS. So we're really lucky technology is completely embedded in our strategic plan and in our learning and teaching development themes, so that really helps us drive some of these projects forward. And this is my lovely department, pulling their best spy poses. And the 2 in the back there are members of my team. Matt, who's unfortunately being strangled at the back there, is the research officer on the iPilot project. And Anna next to him is our VLE administrator. So she looks after the back end of Canvas for us. So this is just a quick timeline to sort of show you where we've been heading with these projects in the last few years. So Canvas was initiated for us way back in 2013. Actually, it was a student-led project. They came to us with it. And then we ran 2 pilots before going out to tender. And then we had a full rollout of Canvas last October. And then in parallel with that, we've had a number of mobile device projects, some of which had external funding, which culminated 2 years ago in what we called the iPilot, which is where we gave iPads to all of the students on certain programs. It's their iPad, it's theirs to keep. And we also gave them to the staff, with the idea being that mobile devices would be completely embedded in their modules and all the learning and teaching. So I'm going to hand over to 2 people who really got this off the ground. One is Tom, who was our Vice President for Education in our student union. I don't know if you're familiar with how student unions work in the UK, but they're really important. They have representation on all of our committees and have a really strong voice. And Amy, who was our Head of Technology Enhanced Learning at the time. And they're wearing their best Canvas t-shirts for you as well.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Keystone. Hi, CanvasCon. Welcome to Winchester in the United Kingdom. This is our beautiful university in the background. And we're going to tell you a bit about our work with iPads.
So our colleague here is Natalie is here with you, and my name's Tom, and I'm the Vice President for Education at Winchester Student Union at the University of Winchester. Here in the UK, it's really important that universities work in partnership with their student unions, and my role was bidding for the iPilot scheme at the University of Winchester. And we were really keen to look at this as it offered a new platform for students to engage. It would offer far more interaction opportunities within the classes, but also for distance learning. It was fantastic, and as well as offering students new ways of learning, new ways of accessing resources, and especially for using Canvas, that has multiplied all those opportunities tenfold.
Hi, I'm Amy, and when Tom had the idea for rolling out iPads with a big group of our first year students, I was Head of Technology Enhanced Learning. So we partnered together and we were looking at enhancing our education provision in the areas of collaboration, creativity and also digital literacy. I thought that if we gave the students a resource and an iPad that they could work with, that would be a really good step in the right direction. So we basically worked together, the Student Union and our Central Learning and Teaching Department, and we put a bid to our senior management as a partnership project to offer iPads to our students.
And it's been a fantastic success, and Natalie will tell you more about it right now. We were successful in bidding for an iPilot. There's funding to run this pilot over the last 2 years, and Natalie right now will tell you lots more information about all the exciting things we've been up to. Thank you.
Thanks,
Have
guys.
a good conference.
Bye.
So one of the questions that we always get asked is, why is it important to give students a tablet? Surely they've already got one. But actually that's not always the case. But I'd be interested to know how many of your students you think have tablets. I don't know if this is going to work, because I know the Wi-Fi is a little bit problematic today. But if you can get onto this website and vote, then please do. No, separate to, so distinctly a tablet as opposed to a smartphone, yeah. So I can't actually bring the results up on the screen because of the way this is configured, but hopefully you can see them on your devices if you've been able to vote. But the strongest result is in the 30 to 50% group. And if I just show you what our findings were, we were surprised to find that in both years of the pilot, 40% of students didn't have their own tablet. So that's really useful information, because there is sometimes an assumption that they do have their own devices, and they don't. Many of them might have laptops. In fact, most of them have a smartphone, predominantly Apple. But some of the activities that lecturers are wanting to do in seminars and in lectures just aren't really possible on a smartphone. It's just not big enough. So it's really useful for us to know that that's not something that they necessarily have access to. We also asked them lots of questions around how you use technology in your personal life, just to understand what their usage is like, what their current levels of digital literacy are like. So all of the programs at the university could apply to be part of the iPilot, and they had to put together a presentation on how they would use the devices and embed them in their learning and teaching. And these were the 7 programs that were successful. And as you can see, we got a really good mixture. So we had things like primary education, that was one of our larger programs, right down to some of our smaller ones. Each one of those little orange men represents 10 students, and the blue ones is 10 staff. So some of those are really small programs with only, say, 20 students in the first year. We've also got some like digital media and communications, where you'd anticipate higher levels of digital literacy from the students. And primary education and social work also do a lot out on placement, which gives you another element as well. And 3 of those programs were also part of our Canvas pilot at the same time. So these were the aims of the iPilot. So to assist program teams and to deliver innovative and imaginative learning, to explore the implication of mobile devices to reduce printing and improve NSS scores. NSS is our National Student Survey, which is conducted outside the university but feeds into all kinds of league tables, so very important to senior management. Increase digital literacy for staff and students, encourage collaborative learning and creativity, and to provide programs with a powerful recruitment tool. We don't have a mobile device management system. We'd love to have one, but they're quite expensive. So we really encourage the teachers to use free apps wherever possible, and we put together pages on our intranet sort of recommending the sort of apps that different programs might want to download at the start of the year. So this is showing over time the amount of time that students are spending in class on directed iPad tasks. And as you can see, it varies quite a lot. It hasn't shifted that much over time, but you have got some students spending over 12 hours a week doing directed iPad tasks in class. We also used a lot of Likert-style questions to find out how they feel about the use of iPads in their studies. Generally, really positive correlations. We always try and run the same questions over time because we look at style statements. There's always a tendency to overscore, but you can reduce that tendency if you keep repeating over time. And same with reverse statements, low levels against those, which is what we want to see. So I mentioned at the beginning about the importance of student engagements at the university. Winchester really prides itself on having a partnership approach. So we have a lot of projects that are genuine staff and student-led collaborations. And in fact, both Canvas and the iPilot were both student-led initiatives. Core to that is something we call the Student Fellow Scheme, where we have over 100 students now who've done a project where they get a £600 bursary, they get some training in research methods, and they conduct their own research into how they can improve some aspects of their student experience within their program. It's a really successful initiative, fantastic results that directly lead to change within the university. And it's co-managed between other members of my department and the student union. So this was built into the iPilot from day one. So these are just a few of the projects that the students were looking at within the first year of the project. So you can see there's quite a broad range of different things. And at the end of the year, they have their own conference and present their findings. I don't have time to go into the detail, but there was so much brilliant information came through. Students respond really well to student-led research because they respond in a different way to just having a survey coming from staff. But I'll just flick you through some of the slides. That's what the iPads look like. So they're all engraved with the University of Winchester. And the students actually really like that. We thought they might not like that, but it actually gives them something they associate with university and as being a device for their learning. Lots that they looked at around alternatives to PowerPoint. And this is some really, really great findings from sports science students about how the students felt about having the iPads. Things like feeling increased levels of connectivity with peers and with staff, higher quality note-taking, better retention of vital information, and similar findings in media and comms. So this is all great to come from the students. So I mentioned Matt earlier, who is in the photo. He's our research officer on this project. He's just going to talk briefly about some of the research methods that we've used to evaluate the impact of the project and some of his observations about collaborative learning.
Hello, I'm Matt, and I am the TEL Research Officer at the University of Winchester, and I am also the project lead for the iPilot project.
Great. Can you tell me a little bit more about the sort of research methods you've used during the iPilot?
Yep, so we have done student focus groups. So we've spoken to groups of students about their experiences of using iPads. We've done staff interviews talking about their practices. And one of the most useful things we've done is lecture observation. So we've actually gone in and we've sat and we've observed the iPads being used in a classroom setting to really get a feel of how they're being utilised.
Fantastic. Can you tell me a little bit more about the programs that were chosen for the iPilot and what you were looking for?
Yeah, so we've got a really broad range of programs. We've got some programs which have got a very practice-heavy element. So primary education and social work, for example, their students go out on placement for part of the year, so they're actually in the workplace using their devices there. We've got some big programs. Primary Ed being one of those. We've got some much smaller programs. We've got digital media and media and communications, two programs which are both very technologically advanced in the kind of topics they look at. So we've had a really broad range, and that was one of the things we wanted, is we want a broad range of disciplines, but also a broad range of student numbers as well, to really get an idea of how the devices could be used in these different sorts of situations.
Great. And one of the areas I know you were looking at was its impact on digital literacy. So have you seen a variation in the digital literacy of not just students but staff as well?
That's been quite interesting. It has been interesting to see how the students have reacted to having this device. For example, with primary education and social work, they've very much seen it as a professional device. So they haven't been using things like Twitter on there, and they haven't been loading it full of games. All the apps they've had on there have been to do with their kind of studies and their working lives. And so they've very much seen it as something that, you know, it is their device, but it's something they've got for work and for studies. From a staff point of view, it's been kind of mixed. We've seen some staff do really interesting things, and others have struggled a bit more to get to grips with it. Some programs, for example, digital media, who are fantastically technologically literate, part of their courses they design apps. So that was a fantastic thing for them to have iPads, because they can build these apps and then use them on the devices right in front of them. But their staff haven't necessarily known how to use the devices in a pedagogic way, and so they can use them brilliantly in a work environment, but they don't necessarily know how to use them or how to get the best out of them for teaching.
Mm-hmm. And I know one of the other areas you're looking at is the impact on collaboration among students. Can you tell me any examples of what you've seen taking place in the programs?
Yeah, so obviously the devices are incredibly portable, and one thing the students have said is that it's brilliant having this device with them, because if they're doing group work, for example, they don't need to try and find a computer in the library and all crowd around a single computer. They can find a quiet corner somewhere on campus. The campus has got Wi-Fi access pretty much everywhere, so they can find a quiet corner no matter where it is, and they can work together on that. Communication has been a big thing as well with regards to collaboration. So because they've all got these devices, they can use the tools available to them, such as Facebook Messenger, for example, and Facebook groups. They're something that come up a lot. But what they do is they use those then to kind of communicate amongst themselves, to arrange when they're going to meet, but also to share files and to kind of swap resources and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And obviously partway through the pilot we rolled out Canvas, which has a lot of the group functionality and collaboration tools. What's your impression of why they might be using Facebook rather than those tools in Canvas?
I think part of it is because when they're doing group work, especially at the initial phases when they're kind of throwing ideas back and forth and kind of not really sure where they're going to go with the project, they don't necessarily want their tutor there looking over their shoulder, as it were, while they're trying to work this stuff out. And although the tutors won't be necessarily looking at everything they're doing, the fact that the tutors could, I think, adds a bit of pressure that doesn't necessarily need to be there. And I think Facebook Messenger, it just takes it out of that situation, and it becomes something separate to that area. You've also got the fact that several students have reported they've had issues with the Canvas app. Mm-hmm. They like it and they can see where it's going, but they just say it's not that reliable, and therefore they end up using the web version of Canvas, which means they then miss out on the instant notifications on their mobile phone. Mm-hmm. And of course, if they're using Facebook Messenger on their phone or indeed on their iPad, they get that instant kind of, someone sent you a message so they can respond straight away. So it just makes the communication that much slicker.
Great, thank you very much.
Right, we're going to come back to talk a little bit more about that Facebook dilemma a bit later. One of the other areas I mentioned we were looking at was developing digital literacies. Terminology's changed a bit since we started the project, so in the UK it's now being referred to as digital capabilities, and we're working with JISC using their framework and definition, which is defined as the capabilities which fit someone for living, learning and working in a digital society. And they have a very detailed framework, which is fantastic. I'm not going to go into detail now, but it works really well for us. So this is an example of how we might break that down into different elements of that framework, and then work with instructors to see how they can embed that within the curriculum, and then we identify the areas where Canvas can particularly support that. So when we ask students, do you feel that your digital capabilities have been enhanced as a result of having iPads incorporated into your learning, you can see we get a really clear yes both years, which is great. We're also using questions that JISC have developed called their JISC Experience Tracker. The reason for this is we can then benchmark against national standards, which is really useful. 22,500 students went through this survey last year, so it gives us a lot of data to look at and compare against. I'm not going to go into detail on this, but the key message from this is that students who are on the iPilot and using Canvas have a much higher frequency of using digital tools or apps to do those three Canvas identified areas. So access lecture notes or recorded lectures, browse additional resources, access learning on the move, and discuss your learning informally on social media if social media has been embedded into their Canvas course. Also, when we compare against national, again, where Canvas is involved and the iPilot, we see that they're well below the national level in terms of never using these digital tools. So this is all really positive stuff. The other area we looked at was creativity. I've got another video which I'm not going to play, but the students have done all sorts of brilliant things to do really creative things with their iPads. So particularly in primary education, they go out into schools and they'll use green screen by doing, for example. So if they're doing something around modern foreign languages, they'll create a French cafe on the green screen using the app. They use Book Creator to story tell and also to log development of a project over time. They use another app that they worked with a local zoo to go in and where animals were quite often asleep, and so it wasn't a very interesting display. They use this app to develop content to make it much more accessible for children when they visit the zoo. I Can Animate they use as well. So all sorts of really interesting things. And then they share all those results of what they're doing out on work placement in schools through Canvas as well. One of my research areas is around creativity, and we've actually got a framework which identifies the different habits that you use when you're being creative. So that's an area we want to explore further next. So coming on to iPilot and Canvas, this is a graphic that we've developed and use internally on all of our internal marketing now, because we really just want to constantly emphasize this cross-platform usability of Canvas. So this is working really well for us. Also, all of our course homepage templates are designed making sure that they're all mobile compatible. So we make sure we test them all both on the web mobile version and in the app. And we use syllabus as our homepage because that seems to resize much better. So that's what we use as standard now. Another question for you. I don't know if it's going to work, but we'll give it a go. So if you could give an example of a digital tool or app that your students find really useful for learning. So for those of you who haven't got access to it, we've got coming through YouTube, Slack, Poll Everywhere, Evernote, YouTube, Elements, various different things. And so if I show you what we got when we asked this question, you can see Canvas came through with by far the highest frequency, which is absolutely fantastic. That's exactly the sort of result that we're looking for. If we take Canvas out of that, the next highest one is Facebook. Now, Matt's already talked a little bit about that. That poses quite a dilemma for us, because on one hand, if students are doing group work in their own time, they should just be able to use whatever app they want to do that. And they do like using Messenger and Facebook groups and so on. But from a welfare perspective, we have a few issues. We've got quite a lot of vulnerable students who feel really uncomfortable with having to do what they perceive as university work in a social media environment. They don't want to share their privacy in that way. Also, if there are incidents where they're being made to feel uncomfortable, it becomes very difficult for us to intervene in that if it's all being done in a private space. So we'd really like to get to a point where we could shift some of that group work into a safe environment, which is Canvas, but at the same time overcoming some of these obstacles where they don't want to feel like their lecturer's looking over their shoulder the whole time. So I'm sure there's ways we can do it, but definitely something we're going to look at more over the next year. If we take Facebook out, we get a much more varied picture, but lots around referencing tools, so RefMe, Cite This For Me, and then various other collaborative tools in there as well. So in January, which was at the end of our first semester, when we'd had the full rollout of Canvas, in the survey I asked them to tell us 3 things that they like about Canvas. And what was great was that the app came out really, really strongly in that. They really liked, I think Ryan mentioned earlier about the convenience of the app, being able to access course information, getting the notifications. So they were really positive about it. But then when we asked them 3 things you think could be improved or added to make Canvas even better, the app came up again. What I've done here is just brought up the comments because there's a whole load of mixed issues within that. Some of them are reporting that the app crashes and it's glitchy. We don't know why that is. Might just be the version of phone they're on, or who knows. Some of them are reporting that it's very slow. Again, we don't know the circumstance. There could be 350 students in a lecture theatre all trying to download the same thing at the same time. Our Wi-Fi probably can't handle that. But then there's other things coming through about finding it tricky to navigate and the fact that it's not consistent with the desktop experience. So that's something that we're going to look at more over the next year to try and get that experience as consistent as possible. But what's interesting is when I went into the support interface to see, okay, so they're reporting all these issues, what have they said to Canvas support? None of them reported any issues to Canvas support at all, which is really frustrating because, you know, we need as much information as possible to dig down into what these issues are so we can improve that experience, but we need the information from the students first. So I knew from the survey I'd done in January that 78% of them were accessing Canvas on a mobile device. So what I wanted to do when I reran the survey in May was really understand were they using the app or were they going in via the web on their mobile device, and what were they actually doing. So I broke the question down a bit further. And as you can see, so the blue line is the app. They're using the app to access course information, resources, and messages and announcements, which is pretty much what I'd expect, but it's nice to see it confirmed. As you can see, very, very rarely are they using it to submit an assignment. And again, that doesn't massively surprise me. I think if you spent a long time writing a long essay or something like that, you're unlikely to submit it via a mobile device. You're much more likely to do that on a laptop or a PC. If I then segment that further into looking at the differences in behaviour between those on the iPilot and those not on the iPilot, we see that those on the iPilot use Canvas via a mobile device more, which again is what we would hope to see, but again, it's nice to see it confirmed in that way. Just a few more of the comments that came through on that survey. So some of them really positive. The concept of Canvas with easy access on a mobile is brilliant. The app is amazing. I would definitely promote it more. Others saying the app is too glitchy. The Canvas app is very temperamental. We need to find out what's going on there. And then, you know, the classic, I didn't even know there was an app, which is always frustrating when you've been promoting it all year. But, you know, these things happen. A few more comments here about how they're using it to access course information. So they're regularly encouraged to use Canvas in seminars to check course information and messages. What staff will quite often do is ask students to bring up a reading in class, and then they'll sit around and discuss it as a group, maybe annotate it together, and all of that they can do through Canvas, which is brilliant. There was quite a lot of feedback came back about the discussion boards. They find the discussion boards on the app quite difficult to use if there's quite a lot of content in there. So that's something we want to look at a bit more, see if there's any way we can improve that for them. And then asking them to rate their experience of the different Canvas tools. You can see it's all pretty positive, but the red line represents those on the iPilot. So again, those on the iPilot are having a more positive experience of Canvas than those not on the iPilot, except with quizzes. And I think there have been some problems with quizzes on a mobile device, so that's the only one where it's lower, but not much lower. So just to summarise some of our early findings. Digital literacy of staff has been a barrier for us both on the iPilot and the Canvas rollout. And really it requires a really fundamental culture change. Staff are coming from a point where they think they just need to be shown how to do something once, and then they never need to come to any training ever again. And we really need them to understand that this is something they need to continually engage in. And that, as I say, does require a culture shift. And we do have some staff who really aren't very confident with technology. When I started doing some Canvas training last summer, I'd say to them, can you open Google Chrome? They'd look at me completely blankly. So it's a browser, look at me blankly, and then you realise, okay, we've got to go quite a long way from there to you becoming a competent Canvas user, and I've got about an hour with you. So it is a challenge. There's some practical considerations around charging, around some device storage capacity. Some of their iPads filled up really fast. There's this continuing question of, is the same device required for all students, or could you be doing this sort of activity anyway? Well, our findings are showing that it really does make a difference. It really seems to prompt that integration into their learning and teaching experiences. If all your students are sitting in front of you with the device waiting to use it, it prompts you as a lecturer to think, okay, how am I going to incorporate that into my session? There's this finding that we've got of them really seeing it as a professional device that doesn't have all their other distractions on it. There's a lot of positive correlations coming through in the data. I've only given you a snapshot there, but we've got loads more. And there's a really positive widening participation angle as well. We want digital equality. We don't want students coming from certain backgrounds who don't have access to technology that others do. But it is expensive, and that's the challenge. In terms of iPilot and Canvas, the Canvas app is seen as really positive. They like the ability to learn on the move, to access the resources, the notifications, all really, really useful. But areas for investigation and improvement for us is around reliability and speed, seeing what we can do with the navigation, accessibility, accessing feedback. A lot of them say they can't access their feedback. I think that's actually because a lot of the feedback's in Turnitin, but in their minds they don't really see the difference. And what we can do about that group and sharing spaces issue. And then final area that would be really great for us is to have more of the mobile usage incorporated into the student analytics. So one of the things that worries me is that the student context card is absolutely fantastic, but it really worries me that a lecturer is going to look at it and think that a student's not read any of the pages at all in their course, when in fact they might have been doing it in the app. So we'd love to get to a point where that data is included and gives the full picture. So that's it from me. I know it's quite a lot of information over a short period of time, but please do come and find me. Or have we got time for questions now? Yes? Yeah, any questions? Yes. So the question was, coming from a UK university, have we seen any correlation yet between NSS, which is our student satisfaction survey, and the project? The answer is not yet, but that's on our agenda for the next few months to cross-reference that data and see what we can draw out from that. But certainly, anything that they can do that cuts down on expenses like printing and all of that sort of thing is a really, really positive thing. Any other questions? Yes. So the question was, we're using the syllabus as our homepage by default, and have we noticed any difference in course design as a result of them having the iPads? Yes and no. So what we've seen among some of the people on the iPilot is a huge variation in how they want to design their courses, which on one hand is great because they're being really innovative. But on the other hand, the key message we keep getting back from students is they absolutely want consistency. So we've got these two conflicting demands, really, where, it's great that the staff are embracing it and wanting to do things, but for students, because they do take these different modules with different staff, they find it really confusing when one does it one way and one does it the other. So we are actually pushing more for consistency rather than innovation in that way. Great. Well, thank you very much, and very happy to discuss it further with anyone afterwards.